Sigan tiempo.
Thanks, Chairman. Thanks, SMF, for the update on the actions on those modified vehicles. May I know from SMS, is there a plan or review to actually go for the enhanced penalty against those who modified their vehicles, the owner and also the one who provide the service? Thank you.
Member for his supplementary question. In fact, since last year in July, we have actually enhanced the penalty framework. We've actually doubled the fines for illegal modifications. And in fact, on the 1st of March this year, a motorcyclist was actually fined $1,200 for illegal modification of his exhaust system. We have also we decided, enhance the penalty framework by requiring, for instance, applying to courts for second and subsequent offenders to have their motorcycles detained for up to 3 months for illegal modification. And currently, the agencies are looking into imposing demerit points in addition to fine for offenders who knowingly drive illegally modified vehicles. And of course, as I've said, we continue to undertake investigations on workshops who provide such services.
Jerogam.
So for trunk services, if ridership has been low, can we use smaller buses or increase the intervals between buses instead of cutting services? This is for trunk services. And for feeder services, after bus 66 was rerouted, my residents were left with only bus 228 as a feeder service to Bedok interchange. And many have told me that the intervals of 15 minutes or more are really too long. And LTA will be aware of this because I've written many letters on behalf of my residents on this matter. So can LTA increase the frequency of feeder bus services to make up for the reduction in other services? And lastly, while I agree there's a need for financial prudence, we must not be penny-wise and pound-foolish if more commuters take public transport instead of private transport. It will lower our carbon footprint and reduce traffic congestion. So does MOT take this into account when it reduces the bus services? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I thank the member for his question. I have a clarification for him because he has heard the explanations that I have given and also what SMS Chee has given in terms of the process and how we go about this. So may I understand, does he accept the principle that as we expand our rail network and as we invest more and the capital base and the asset base grows, we have an obligation to optimize across the system? So is he disagreeing with us on the principle, or is it about the process, or is it specifically about the outcome in his constituency? I'd like clarity on that.
Thank you, Minister. I don't disagree with the principle that we must optimize, but I disagree with how sometimes it is optimized, because I feel that sometimes, for example, for trunk services, yes, there's a need to ensure that the services are not running empty, but there are a small group of people, elderly, disabled, who need to travel for long distances, and they find it very inconvenient to transfer a lot. So that's why I'm asking, as a compromise, can there be mini buses being used, smaller buses?
Mr. Chairman, I thank the member for that clarification. It's helpful because it means that we agree in principle that we have a fiscal responsibility to see what we can do to optimize the resources. SMSG will be able to give more information on the specific points about trunk routes and alternatives. But the member also raised the point about financial prudence and about being penny wise and pound foolish. When a proposal is made that will incur $300–400 million more a year, I don't think that's being, when we raise questions about that, I don't think that's being penny wise and pound foolish. I think it's all about big pounds that are at stake. And when I listen to some of the comments from Mr. Giam and also his colleague, Mr. James Lim, I'm reminded, Mr. Chairman, with your indulgence, there's an Ernest Hemingway book, The Sun Also Rises. And in it, there's a character, Mike Campbell, and he's asked, how did you go bankrupt? And he replies, 2 ways, gradually and then suddenly. And I think we need to remember this. If we resist every effort to optimize, and if we champion every effort to increase services or collect less, but resist every effort to perhaps increase fares and other measures to have the financial resources to do what we need to do, then what we will end up with is this. The creep will be gradual and the end will be sudden. And that is the risk that we run. So what we are trying to do here, and I think I'm not the first transport minister to make this point, it has been made by generations of transport ministers, and I'm sure many more to come, is really to strike that all-essential balance. I don't think there's a monopoly of virtue here in terms of wanting to help Singaporeans, especially those who are in vulnerable segments. But what we are trying to do is make sure that we are being fair to our commuters, to our taxpayers, to the vulnerable segments, and also to public transport operators and their financial viability.
Mr. Cheong-Tat.
Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I will address some of the more specific points that Mr. Giam mentioned. Specifically on Service 228, I touched on this thing about feeder services in my main speech earlier. Now, for 228, Mr. Giam did give us some feedback because initially when the bus services were shortened, what LTA then tried to do was precisely like what he mentioned, to then make sure that we have bus service 228 to provide the connectivity to the necessary key transport nodes. So when Mr. Giam shared the feedback with us, we then followed up with the bus operators to make improvements and adjustments to bus service 228. So just to share some data in terms of the loading level and the waiting time, before Mr. Giam shared the feedback with us, the maximum load during peak periods was about 70 to 75%. So this was not excessive, but it would feel more crowded than usual. So we understand the concerns. So when Mr. Giam shared the feedback with LTA then worked with the operator to make some adjustments, and then the peak loads have now dropped to below 45%. In fact, on most days, and I'm referring to peak period, it is around 25%. So the situation has improved, and I want to thank Mr. Giam for sharing his feedback with us to enable us to be able to address some of these local concerns. About waiting time, sir, 228, I don't think what Mr. Giam said earlier is factually correct. During the morning peak, between 6 a.m. to 6:45 a.m., actually LTA has asked the bus operator to increase the frequency, precisely because we understand that this is the peak period. So the frequency is actually every 5 minutes. There is another way to help residents to shorten the waiting time so they don't have to go to the bus stop too early, is to help them to use the My Transport app. I understand maybe some of the seniors may not be so familiar with technology, but that is also an area where collectively, as a community, we can reach out to them through awareness, raising awareness, public education, help them to be able to use these tools so that they can plan their journeys, they can shorten the waiting time. And I think importantly, the shift that I was explaining in my main speech will allow us to provide new feeder services to new areas, meeting the needs of other commuters. So yes, I think we want to take care of the needs of as many commuters as possible, but our responsibility is not just to one group of commuters, but to actually all commuters collectively. And we do need to weigh these difficult trade-offs and to make the adjustments accordingly. One last point, sir. I think I do need to point out that, because we shift from bigger buses to smaller buses, it doesn't mean that the cost will shrink correspondingly. I explained in my speech, we still need to have bus captains to drive the buses in shifts. We still need to have a maintenance crew to be able to maintain the bus fleet. In fact, if we buy new minibuses, actually you will have to incur additional upfront costs to buy the buses, and then we have to train a new group of bus captains and a new group of technical crew to maintain these minibuses. So from a logistics and maintenance and cost point of view, I'm not sure that will actually end up with lower costs. Thank you, sir.
Associate Professor James Lim.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ms. Iswaran, for his explanation. I feel I should clarify that the proposal that I had explicitly states that the subsidy should be borne by MOT expenditures, not by other riders. So he spent quite a bit of time, I felt, attacking a little bit of a straw man. Now, it is fair to say that 300 million and 400 million is not chump change, but as I also mentioned in my speech, we should be clear that this is about 3 to 4% an increase in the ministry's budget, not when you said it within context. Now, I did also sought a compromise, and I wonder, and this wasn't touched on in Minister Iswaran's clarification, which is that even if MOT believes that an unconstrained subsidy is unaffordable, what of the possibility of free ridership during off-peak hours? The marginal costs in these cases are likely to be minimal, and is mainly in the form of foregone revenue, since buses and trains are already operating with spare capacity in this case. And in fact, during the description of what happened during COVID, Transport Minister Ong Ye Kung mentioned that buses were ferrying air. So I wonder, instead of ferrying air, could we instead ferry the elderly and the disabled in our society?
Mr. Speaker, I thank the member for his question. Let me start by saying it's not exactly a straw man argument at all, because fundamentally there is a need to explain where the money is going to come from. By the member's estimates, I'm not saying that I agree with his estimate, but his estimate is $300 to $400 million. And then he says it's 3 to 4% of the ministry's budget. I would urge you to look at the budget carefully. The ministry's budget of $11 billion includes 2/3, which is development expenditure. What you are proposing is a recurrent operational subsidy of $300 to $400 million. So in other words, it is on the lower base that we should be looking at. And specifically, the ministry's operating budget in the last couple of years has been increased because of COVID-specific measures. So if you discount that further, what you're actually proposing is an increase in the subsidies, if I use the $2 billion reference point, of about 25%, 20 to 25%. That is a significant increase. Now, should we incur such an increase? I think it's something we should debate. But I think then we should also, to be intellectually rigorous, also examine where the member and his party stand when it comes to sources of revenue. Because you have to square the circle. So if we resist moves, last year we increased fare revenue, and I know that the leader of the opposition made a point about how fare revenue fares have increased and that's contributing to cost of living. In other words, the Workers' Party looks askance at increases of fares, and yet we are also arguing for spending more. And where do we come from? Well, from the government revenue, but we also take a dim view of, or the member and his party take a dim view of several of the revenue sources that have been proposed by the finance minister. So we have to square the circle, and it's by no means a straw man.
Ms. Polisan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I have two questions. One is for Minister Iswaran. Thank you for the One Aviation Fund to assist the airport community. Minister Iswaran mentioned that about 1/3 of our airport workers have actually already left the airport given the pandemic situation. And we know that in the airport, many frontline jobs are actually filled by foreign workers. So my question is that given the border closures or the border restrictions, how can the government further help the airport companies get ready and ensure that we have sufficient workers to be prepared for the recovery of the aviation sector? The second question is for SPS Baey. Thank you for sharing about the island-wide cycling network and the plans. And I'd like to know if there are any plans to prioritize the building of the stretches of cycling network for cyclists who are involved in day-to-day commuting, especially in the last mile stretches to the, for example, to the MRT stations, so that during these peak periods where the cyclists are rushing, there could be a surge in the traffic, and that may lead to a safety concern, especially against pedestrians who are using the same stretch. So I'd like to hope that there will be some prioritization of the building of such last mile stretches in the cycling network first. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, if I may, I omitted to respond to a specific point that Associate Professor James made, which was on whether we could consider off-peak measures, which I think was one of his ideas. I would never rule any option out. But again, I just want to make the point that when you run a concession fare system, then basically what it means is you pay one concession fee and then you can vary the terms, but then the revenue level is there. But once we say we are switching from off-peak to peak and so on, then essentially it changes the construct, and we have to look at this quite carefully. So I just wanted to make the point. I wouldn't rule out any options going forward, because as I've said, there are various factors that we have to take into account in thinking through our fare formula and our approach. But I just wanted to make that point specifically. And I want to thank the member, Ms. Polisan, for her question. Indeed, she has raised a very important point, because it is one thing to say we want to increase our arrivals to 50% or more of pre-COVID levels, but how to make it happen, because there's been this significant attrition in manpower, and we have to re-employ. So MOT and CAS are working with the unions, with their companies, first, of course, to see how many Singaporeans we can bring back into the fold. This is an important priority. But at the same time, a significant portion of the attrition has been manpower from overseas. And so we are also working with the Ministry of Manpower to see what kind of solutions we can put in place, because once we decide to go towards vaccinated, quarantine-free travel, the volumes will pick up significantly, and we need to make sure that from a capacity perspective, we are geared up. And the ability to bring in the requisite level of manpower is key, and we are working with the companies and the Ministry of Manpower on that.
Leader of Opposition. Mr. BMK.
Yeah. So I'd like to assure Member Polisan that when we plan the island-wide cycling network, it is first at a town level, and within a town at different phases. Okay, so as we plan the rollout, it will look at the last mile connectivity, especially to places where many residents go to. So in the Bukit Panjang example I quoted, the CC, public transport hub, or hawker centres. But we must also plan it such a way that there's connectivity among the different stretches of cycling path, so that it makes sense for cyclists to be able to enjoy a more seamless cycling path network. Thank you.
Mr. Pritam Singh, if you can keep it to a minute, so that we can have perhaps a minute's response. And then we're done.
I will, Speaker. Thank you. I didn't intend to rise, but I had to after Minister of Transport stood up and spoke of intellectually rigorous. I think he was going to say intellectually honest, but he stopped himself and said intellectually rigorous alternative proposals. And indeed, as part of this budget debate, the Workers' Party has put up 4 alternate levers. It's not as if the money is going to come from an unknown source. So I just wanted to clarify that point, that the party put up 4 different levers to consider where additional revenues can come from to address some of the issues that we've raised, not just here by Member Jameson, but also in our manifesto. I think it's important for me to put that out.
Mr. Chairman, I thank the leader for the clarification. Intellectual rigor, intellectual honesty. I'm not sure what, I mean, the leader appears to be imputing words, but whatever it is, I think you can't have rigor without honesty. So let's leave it at that. But in terms of proposals, I don't intend to canvass again the arguments about different sources of revenue. I think they have been well discussed in the main budget debate on the budget policies and so on. However, I want to bring it back to this ministry's budget because it is an important point. Every year, we have to address this issue of the balance between quality service, affordability, and financial sustainability. And this is not going to go away. So when we make proposals, it cannot be that we make proposals that incur additional expenses under one head, but then say, but it will all be taken care of in some macro level, because we do need the discipline of also addressing how, within that particular ministry's budget, we are making every effort to find the appropriate balance.
Mr. Saktiandi Supat, you can withdraw your amendment, please.
Mr. Chairman, thanks. The state of our air, sea, and land transport is a reflection of our economic and social state of our country. And I think we've discussed today quite a significant range on air, land, and sea. And I think I'm really looking forward to all our efforts to make our air and sea hub status thrive again, and the job opportunities that SMS Chee mentioned just now in the maritime SG and in various other sectors, and also including some of the cycling paths, the dedicated cycling paths that's going to come on stream, and also the TEL, the JRL and CRL. So in other words, we have a wide range of exciting opportunities in the transport sector. But before I withdraw my amendment, I would like to thank members for all their 30+ cuts, and many thanks to Minister Iswaran, SMS Amy Khor, SMS Cheong Tat, SPS Baey for their responses. And I think also to PSMOT and his team, and our MOT family of agencies, CAS, MPA, LTA, and most importantly, to all our frontline workers in the transport sector. I think they put in a huge effort, not just over the last year, but over the past 2 years. And I've been saying this for the previous budget cuts and discussions. So all the hard work, conviction and passion to keep our air, sea hub, land hubs work well and going forward and being future ready. So with that, Chairman, I beg leave to withdraw my amendment. Thanks.
Is the honourable member given leave to withdraw the amendment? I think leave of the majority is given. The amendment is withdrawn. The question is that the sum of 3,704,101,400 dollars for head W stand part of the main estimates. As many as of the opinion say aye. To the contrary, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The question is that a sum of $7,216,684,300 for HW sent part of the development estimates. As many as are as of the opinion say aye. To the contrary, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.